Hey everyone, I got a piece of steel in from my friend Chris over at Costa Knives, and I'm going to take you through the process of making an awesome knife out of it. Here's a piece of steel. It's a mosaic pattern and it's about probably like 1/4 inch thick and 10 inches long, so it should be about good size for a big EDC knife. Here's a close-up of the pattern. I did a little surface grind on it and a quick etch in ferric chloride acid just so I could see what the pattern looks like. Once I polish it up all the way and do a reeled etch, and maybe I'll even do a coffee etch on it, the pattern will get much darker and more vibrant. I'm going to be making an EDC Cleaver out of this bar of steel. I chose that design because the blade has a big surface area that'll show off the pattern really well. I'm not sure what handle I'm going to put on it yet, but once it's back from hardening, I'll decide. Now I'm going to cut out the rough profile on the bandsaw. Here's the rough profile of the knife. After cutting it out on the bandsaw, I was left with this nice scrap of Damascus that's too good to throw away. Let me know if you have any bright ideas of what I should do with it. I'm going to start refining the profile by using the small wheel attachment on the grinder to get into this curvy area of the handle. Now that I have the curvy part of the handle shape, I'm going to go to the flat platen of the grinder and take care of these flatter portions. Now that I've got the finished profile of the knife, I'm going to polish it up to an A100 Trizac belt, and then I'll be ready to drill the holes in it. Now that the knife has more holes than a block of Swiss cheese, it's ready to be jimped and have a sharpening notch put in, and then the bevels will be ready to be ground. I always drill a ton of extra holes like this so that you have a lot of extra room for epoxy to fill in the gaps, and also since this stock is around 1/4 inch thick and really heavy, these holes will provide a lot of weight reduction for the finished knife. The sharpening notch that I'm filing in right now is going to allow you to sharpen all the way to the back of the edge of the knife, instead of having this odd wave-like shape that forms when you don't have a sharpening notch from the steel being worn away unevenly. I'm also going to be adding some jimping to the top of the spine of the blade right here where your thumb goes, just to add some extra grip. I'm doing all these steps using a 5/32 inch chainsaw file that I attached a golf ball to, just to use as a handle so that I don't stab myself with the end of the file. It also lets me get a lot more leverage and do the work much faster. Now that I have the sharpening notch and the finger grooves in, I'm going to start my beveling process by using a worn down 60 grit belt. I usually like starting with a worn down belt because when you're grinding off these corners, the corners will like to strip off the fresh grit of a new belt and will make the belt last a really short time. So once I get those first initial bevels in, I'm going to switch to a fresh 60 grit belt and clean them up and get them down to the final thickness before hardening. Now that I have the rough grind in, I'm going to come back with a 120 grit belt and clean it up a little bit. With the same 120 grit belt, I'm now going to add a swedgin on the front and along the spine here. I always like adding swedges because it gives the blade a really nice, interesting look and adds some depth because the angles catch the light differently. This step's totally unnecessary, but I really am excited to see what this pattern is looking like, so I'm going to give it a quick test etch in some ferric chloride acid to see what it looks like. The knife's looking pretty awesome right now, but once we send it off to hardening and get it back, I'm going to finish up the blade, do a real etch on it, so that the pattern's even more vibrant, and then chew the handle and get it all finished up. The knife's back from hardening, so now I'm going to go through the process of finishing it up. I'm going to be using a beautiful piece of ringed gidgee from Ben over at Greenberg Woods for this handle. There's going to be a link in the description to his shop, so definitely if you're looking for some beautiful handle material, go check him out. I'm also going to be using these Mosaic pins. I have the handle shape all marked out on the scales, so I'm going to have it so I have a nice bit of sapwood on the top of the handle, and then the nice dark heartwood on the main part of the handle. I'm going to start by cutting it out on the bandsaw, and then I'm going to drill the holes and get them all shaped up. Now that I've got the handles roughly cut out, I'm going to go over to the grinder and flatten them up and then drill the pin and lanyard holes. I want the whole spine of this knife to be etched, so I need to now shape all of the handle before gluing this time. So I have 3 sacrificial pins in, and I'm going to do all my contouring and shaping and sanding before I glue it. Here's the first side roughly shaped. can see I have nice little contours in here where your fingers go, and then I rounded off the spine and rounded the butt. Now it's time to do the other side. I got the handles all polished up and taken off the knife, and now I'm going to start working on the blade. So I'm first going to grind down the bevels with a 120 grit belt and polish it all the way up to a 400 grit belt that I have loaded with green compound. Now I'm just etching my name into the spine of the knife using my electro etching system. I'm starting with it on an etch setting so that it does a deep etch of the logo on it. Then I'm going to switch over to the mark setting so that it darkens the etch. Here's the finished logo etch. You can kind of see that it catches my nail a little bit, so you can tell that it's deep inside the metal. I degreased the blade with some rubbing alcohol, and now it's time to etch the blade to reveal the pattern. Into the acid it goes. Here it is outside of the acid. As you can see, it's really dark black right now, so I'm going to need to sand it with a little bit of worn out 2000 grit sandpaper to bring out the contrast. Just going to do 1 or 2 more quick cycles, about 5-10 minutes of etching to get the pattern a little bit deeper. To really darken the dark parts of the steel, I'm now going to put the knife in a really concentrated batch of instant coffee for about an hour. The acidity of the instant coffee is going to darken up the dark steel and leave the lighter types of steel alone. Here's the finished etch after the coffee and a little bit more light sanding. Now I'm just gluing everything together using some G-Flex epoxy. The glue's been curing overnight, so now all that's left is going to be taking down this extra pin material and refinishing the tops of the handles. Now I'm just going to do a light coat of oil on the handle. The very last step of this build is going to be sharpening it up. I'm going to head it back over to the grinder and use a 120 grit belt to set the edge, then polish it up to around 400 before stropping the burr off with my leather strop that I have loaded with 1 micron diamond spray. And here's the finished product. There's so many cool different things about this knife, between the patterned steel, the beautiful wood in the handle, and those really detailed mosaic pins. Let us know what you think in the comments, and thank you so much for following along.